This morning, we are joined by Catawba College political science professor, Dr. Michael Bitzer. Good morning, Dr. Bitzer. I know it was a long night for you and everyone across the country. Let's start here in North Carolina first. Were there any races or results that surprised you?
Well, I think in general, what has really surprised me is the Harris performance or lack thereof. I think what we're still digesting a lot of these numbers, but in some early looking at comparing 2024 to 2020, her performance in the eastern part of the state, particularly in what we call majority minority counties, counties where you see significant Black population, basically cratered compared to what Joe Biden did in 2020. And I think we need to really dig into the dynamics and see what happens. I think writ large, North Carolina has followed its usual pattern of being Republican at the federal level and Democratic at the state level for governor specifically, and that we are simply a competitive bipolar state. If you look at the Council of State races, I think the last time I looked at it, 5 Democrats win, 5 Republicans win. It is truly a razor edge margin here in North Carolina. That has been the case for several years. It will continue likely into the future.
And Dr. Bitzer, former President Trump securing that massive victory overnight, largely against what the polls had predicted would happen. Where do you think they got it wrong?
Well, I would take a little exception to the polls getting it wrong, because what we saw was incredibly tight races in all 7 of the battleground states. North Carolina, for example, was basically evenly tied going into election day. Take into account the margin of error. Could be as high as a 3-point advantage or a 3-point disadvantage. What we saw was basically Donald Trump win with a 3-point advantage at the top of the margin of error. For most of the battleground states, the polls fell within the margin of error, and it looks like, for the most part, the victories are going to fall within that margin of error. So, you know, we're all kind of focused on polls. The polls didn't tell us anything other than it was going to be extremely tight. And yes, a sweep of all 7 battleground states was in the cards. That's just the natural dynamic of what you see in a statistically tied environment in many of these states.
So, Dr. Bitzer, what can we expect from a second Trump term? Specifically, what would the first 100 days look like?
Well, I mean, if we take Project 2025, we've got the blueprint written out very clearly. I think that there's going to be some fundamental public policy shifts, particularly if Republicans control both chambers of the U.S. Congress. Right now, the House is still up for grabs. The Senate is clearly going to be in Republican control. The question is, how much will Republicans be able to push through? Will they break the filibuster to get some of these policies enacted? And will Donald Trump basically carry out the wishes and the policy directions that Project 2025 has laid out in front of us? We have, we can read that document. We've had discussions over that particular document. If these policies get into effect, it will be a significant public policy change for the United States.
A lot of Democrats, especially in Mecklenburg County, more than 60% of that vote went to Harris. So waking up to the news this morning, what do you say to those Democrats moving on? How do they move on after last night's result?
Well, certainly it was, again, a question of turnout. I believe Mecklenburg had a 69% turnout rate. The state was at 73. Once again, Mecklenburg was below the numbers. In terms of looking at the actual raw vote totals, Donald Trump added 6,700 votes to his 2020 performance in Mecklenburg. Kamala Harris lost 6,200 votes. So even though it was fairly evenly divided percentage-wise, there is something fundamental shifting in the electorate that we need to better understand, that we need to kind of dig into the data to really see where the dynamics were. The exit polls were giving us some indication, but particularly among Latino men, that was the significant shift occurring there. So there's a lot to digest, less than 24 hours. I can't offer a whole lot of insight, but we'll get that over the next several weeks.
Just a follow up to that, I just want your thoughts. It's not really a question, but I spent some time with the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party as we were entering this final stretch of the presidential election. I mean, they knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors. They increased the number of staff members. They had thousands of volunteers. I mean, what is the game plan after this election? I mean, they really thought that Mecklenburg County, again, turnout. They really expected a greater turnout.
I think after every campaign, most of the losing campaigns do what's called an autopsy. Let's try and figure out what killed us in the field. And certainly the investment of resources, the investment of energy and volunteers in this state, particularly for the Harris campaign and for Democrats, was considerably notable. Where that didn't pay off, I think we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But there will be, a lot of digesting of this data to better understand moving forward. And the fact of the matter is, Democrats did have a good night. They won the governorship. They were able to break the supermajority, at least it looks like, in the state house. There will be some opportunities for Democrats to be at the table when it comes to North Carolina public policy decisions moving forward. But this is going to require some real soul searching, I think, and understanding of where things lie in what feels like a slightly new environment for North Carolina politics and for the country as a whole.
Speaking of North Carolina, interesting that, Josh Stein, the projected governor there, is going to be working with the Republican majority, maybe even a supermajority. We've seen this historically for a long time now, but how do you think that this is going to impact his time as governor?
Well, it's going to certainly make it much more challenging. And I think what we will see is the question of, can Republicans potentially pick off one or two Democrats and have them side with them on some public policy issues? Or can Stein really keep party unity, particularly among Democrats in the state house, unified and cohesive? I think that's the real question. Can there be some outreach between the executive branch and the legislature in terms of some critical issues that face North Carolina? That is a potential. But when you're dealing with such super numbers in both chambers, state, Senate, most likely very much in supermajority status, state house very close, we will just have to wait and see how both sides decide to interact with each other and deal with some of the issues and challenges that North Carolina faces. That will be a 4-year experiment to see where this goes.
And Dr. Bitzer, you talk about this changing political landscape, especially here in North Carolina. A trend we've been seeing for the past couple of decades. I'm from North Carolina. I mean, the state votes Republican for president, but then goes Democrat for governor and attorney general. Why is that?
That is the literally $64 million question of North Carolina politics. We have had a very long history and tradition going back into the 1970s of being a state that is very bipolar at the top of the ticket, voting Republican at the federal level, voting Democratic, particularly for the gubernatorial level. Sometimes they line up and it's a straight kind of party ticket down the dynamic. But I think what we saw, particularly with the Council of State races, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, the various commissioners, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Treasurer. I think what we saw was a fairly tight bandwidth of basically the winners getting 51, maybe 52% of the vote, and that consistently bounced down the ballot. So in my read, about 5%, 6% potentially of North Carolina voters are that classic bounce down the ballot swing kind of voters, split ticket voters, if you will. But the vast majority of North Carolina voters are probably solidly locked into one party over the other. And we see this play out every election. So it's no real surprise from that factor. But, certainly we need further analysis to kind of better understand what's going on.
And the last Republican governor, Pat McCrory, and he lost in 2016 to now Governor Roy Cooper. Dr. Bitzer, thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure.